Every day, we are learning more about our changing world. Every day, ideas are born, challenges become opportunities. To achieve our purpose, we need people who can turn ideas into reality, who can create success. That's us at ABB. Thinkers, engineers, scientists, innovators. We push the boundaries of technology to make industry safer, more intelligent, and more productive.
Hello, I'm Warren Pearce. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Mining and Exploration Companies, otherwise known as AMEC, and it's a pleasure to be with you. For those of you who don't know the association, we're a national association representing mining and mineral exploration companies and over 345 member companies across Australia. Our focus is on increasing greenfield and brownfield exploration, reducing the cost of doing business and reducing red tape here in Australia. I'm going to talk to you today a little about the experience the mining and mineral exploration industries had through COVID-19. And indeed, entering 2020, we'd come off a difficult few years previously, low levels of investment, a lot of uncertainty around the global economic environment, fueled by things like the US versus China trade war, what would happen with Brexit, and of course, Middle East tensions. But optimism was increasing, and indeed, we thought 2020 was going to be the year that things turned around for us. There's a strong gold price, a fair to good commodity price environment, and indeed the Institute surveys had seen a number of Australian states move up the rankings, with Western Australia, South Australia, the Northern Territory and Queensland all improved their investment attractiveness ratings. When COVID-19 hit, it had an immediate impact on the industry. The reality was that for the mining industry, huge changes were required overnight to get across social and physical distancing requirements, to ensure good hygiene and to make sure we're meeting the health requirements, indeed prevent the spread within our industry, but also to prevent any risk of spread into the community. We had to implement infectious disease plans, emergency protocols. A huge effort was made to integrate the mining operations with the public health systems. And indeed, there was a strong view within industry that would be significant community transmission within the country and that our industry and operations would not be immune. For exploration, the impact was significant and it happened fast. Large portions of Australia were suddenly inaccessible, particularly in WA and NT and Queensland with the biosecurity areas. Hard state and territory borders went up, severely limiting movement of people across borders. And indeed, as we anticipated this to be a very long and difficult period, many exploration companies chose to cease exploration programs to preserve capital. Mining companies dropped exploration, focused on their operations, and indeed, those programs that were underway kept going, not knowing when they might be able to recontinue. So indeed, things looked pretty dire back in March of 2020. We surveyed our members of that period and found that 74% of exploration companies that either ceased or mostly ceased operations, 74% or nearly 3/4 didn't think they would be able to raise capital within a year. And indeed, 75% of those companies had either reduced wages or adjusted salaries down for employees. And nearly half of those companies had already undertaken or had planned actual redundancies. So it was a very difficult period. However, the mining industry travelled through it very well. The reality was that they were able to keep operations open in all states and territories, keep COVID-19 out of our supply chains. Yes, there were some hiccups, but essentially all sites managed to manage those challenges well. And indeed, Australia itself has been able to come through that period exceptionally well and be seen as a jurisdiction that will be able to continue operations, important for security of supply and as a safe investment destination away from the impacts of COVID-19. At the same time, production exports over that period have been extraordinary. We've had record commodity exports reaching a record of 287 billion in 2019-20. Iron ore particularly has travelled exceptionally well through that year, reaching over $100 billion of exports in a single year, and indeed gold exports reached a record of 24 billion. So essentially the mining industry has been confounding expectations and heading much better than the rest of Australia's industry. And indeed, we've been buffeted by a strong period leading in on exploration. We've had 2 or 3 years of strong exploration investment, and that's starting to show record success. The recent exploration successes and early discoveries, Staveley Minerals in Victoria, Legend Mining in Western Australia, Chalice Gold, Musgrave Minerals and Mincor in WA, as well as Apollo Consolidated with Lake Rebecca project. But Aurelia Metals has been successful in New South Wales. You've seen Rio Tinto at Winnow in Western Australia, BHP in South Australia. The exploration success has not been limited to one jurisdiction, and indeed that's supercharged interest in our sector, and indeed helps supercharge investment back into our sector. And indeed we've seen that exploration expenditure up 18% to 2.8 billion in the 2019-20 period. So indeed we're going through what is essentially a bumper period. As you can see from this graph, it tracks Greenfield expenditure by state. You can see the trending very strongly up in 2018-19 and 2019-20. The blue line there is Western Australia, but you can also see every other state and territory has also seen a trend up, and we're actually seeing that taking place across the country, which is fantastic. The investment dollars really returned since about April, May. In fact, the June quarter saw a record of cash inflows into the sector of about $1.8 billion. $1.3 billion, which is incredible. And indeed, you've started to see capital be available for companies looking to raise. Now, a lot of that's been in the gold space, but you've also seen the base metals and battery minerals companies coming through as well. There's now a very significant amount of money returning to the sector. That's helped companies get cashed up, and that will support the exploration programs for the next 18 months, 2 years. And of course, we're also now seeing a great number of companies heading towards IPO, with over 60 expected in the second half of this year, which is also fantastic. The economic outlook in our industry versus the rest of the country is quite different. And indeed, when the country is predicting north of 10% unemployment across the nation, the mining industry is looking to grow. There's 106 mining projects that have completed feasibility studies. There's over $50 billion of investment flowing from these projects. It could create over 32,000 construction jobs and 22,000 ongoing operating jobs across Australia. Here in Western Australia, it's estimated to be 8,000 mining workers needed in the next 18 months. And looking at Queensland SEEK advertisements this morning, there's over 700 jobs currently being advertised in mining in Queensland today. So a very, very contrasting picture between the mining industry and the rest of Australia. We're not without our challenges. We're going to be living with COVID-19 for a while. Even as good news breaks around vaccination, it's going to be into the second half of next year. We're likely living and contending with COVID. We're going to continue to see ongoing travel restrictions. And indeed, that's going to have an impact on interstate FIFO workforces, and indeed the ability to move across the country to projects and to bring people back and forth. JobKeeper is still having an impact, and JobSeeker. JobKeeper has been incredibly important, keeping particularly the service industry operating, but indeed JobSeeker has harmed our ability to get people into the industry, particularly for drillers, where it's been difficult to get people to apply for those roles, and indeed service providers are still under considerable pressure. All happening at a time when the mining industry is growing, and some of these artificial constraints are, of course, putting more pressure on the industry. For AMEC's point, will we continue the advocacy? There's been a big focus from governments to really think about the economic recovery, to look at what they can do about streamlining processes and try and kickstart some economic development in Australia. That's led to some great announcements around the EPBC and a desire to move forward with bilateral assessments and approvals and single touch approvals. You're seeing state and territory governments working on streamlining their own legislation and indeed making concerted effort to drive economic development in their own jurisdiction. That's really important. It's something we'll be concentrating on. There's a big opportunity here to seize this moment to lock in long-term changes for the benefit of industry. And that's indeed where AMEC will be focusing in late 2020, early 2021. Looking forward, I think the picture for the industry is very strong. The reality is there's been strong interest in investment in exploration here in Australia. There's been greater reinvestment from mining companies on the back of strong revenues and greater dividends on offer for shareholders. There's a range of new projects heading into the pipeline towards development: gold, iron ore, copper and nickel, and indeed new industries emerging in sulphate of potash and vanadium, which is really exciting. We're seeing Australian-based international explorers start to return home, pick up projects in Australia and refocus their efforts here in Australia. Particularly, they've been unable to travel or access their projects overseas, and indeed the impacts of COVID are quite uncertain in other places around the world. Also, we're seeing a huge effort from countries around the world to inject stimulus into their economies, and that's largely focused on infrastructure spends, and that will continue to support the growing demand for our commodities. So all things ahead. Hard to say exactly what the future will hold with COVID-19. It's a very uncertain picture, but many of it seems to be playing out in the mining industry's favour here in Australia, and indeed point to a strong period ahead for Australian mining and mining exploration. So that's the presentation. Fantastic to be within part of IMARC again this year. If you'd like to contact AMEC or the association to discuss what we're doing and how we can assist you, please feel free to get in contact. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much.
Every day, we are learning more about our changing world. Every day, ideas are born, challenges become opportunities. To achieve our purpose, we need people who can turn ideas into reality, who can create success. That's us at ABB. Thinkers, engineers, scientists, innovators. We push the boundaries of technology to make industry safer, more intelligent, and more productive.